Greetings, folks. Be in my bonnet time again. Right, so some of these got some typos on there because no spell check on the typewriter. An anti-ADHD measure. So this is about. So some Socionics people will raise the objection. Oh, NF, NT, we're with you. Why does it go SJ, SP? It's not symmetrical. It's no good. Why is it not symmetrical? We want it symmetrical. Okay. So, yes, symmetry's got another. I'm terrible with double letters, whether it's double or single. Right. So, links. Okay. Also showed a Dario explanation which channels Linda. So let's go through this. So, what's this? 2015. Although I would argue that was 2014 and the 11th month of 2014. But no, my own date system is not important to you. Right, to answer Ben's question about Keirsey temperaments and type, what does deep theoretical level mean here? In a nutshell, SPs and SJs are world-oriented and NT and NF types are cognitive-oriented. Yeah, because artisans and guardians, SPs and SJs, are concrete, and instincting is related to the concrete, and intuition is related to the abstract. And so, and with an abstraction, abstractions are cognitive oriented. The hypositive for sensing types, that's instincting types, concrete types, the tangible outer world has a special relevance because they're strongly anchored or interested in tangible reality. For them, the line between the inner and outer worlds is distinct. Thus, for instincting types, the function that is oriented to the outer world, be it SETE or FE, is really crucial. In contrast, for intuiting types, the conceptual inner world has a special relevance because they enjoy exploring ideas, possibilities, metaphors, potential, theories, etc., all mental abstractions. For them, the line between the real world and the conceptual world is fuzzy. Thus, for intuiting types, the function pairs, the nature of the psychological condition itself is particularly important. Intuiting with thinking or intuiting with feeling. So, I'll add to that the abstract types do more interpreting than the concrete types. So, a concrete type is likely to say of an abstract type, oh, you're overthinking it, you're reading too much into it. So, the abstract type is doing more interpretation. And so, interpretation is more important to the abstract type than the concrete type. So, the nature of that interpretation, whether it's NT or NF, is more important because they're doing more interpretation, doing more reading into it than with the concrete types. Whereas for the concrete types, they're more about the actual sensory data. And so how the response to that sensory data, or sort of what the focus of attention is, the empirical versus the subjective, is more important than the interpretation. So yes, we've got a little bit of overlap here between interpretation and SI, but the interpretation of the guardian is not a interpretation. It stays within the field of irrationality because it's not really thought about. It's in terms of, it's like someone had a bad experience with somebody with a particular name, and they hear that name, and it's like, damn it, I don't like that name, Michael, or something like that. And these sort of highly subjective associations on a sensory plane, that's not interpretation in terms of the way the abstract type, in terms like the way they think about it, but it's all associative. So I have a little bit of an issue with this perceiving versus judging thing, because perception, Van der Hoek got it right when he described perception as a narrow, circumscribed process more related to thought. He's right. It's in Keirsey books. I've got one over there. There's 4 main components to cognitive psychology: perception, memory, linguistics, and reasoning. And so within perception, you've got, and I've been reading this book on cinematography and to help with the directing of the sitcom. And there's a lot of there in terms of perception of depth cues and all of these things, aspects related to that, and object recognition and facial recognition. This is related to thought. This is not sensor. That is perception. It's always like object recognition. When you do not recognize an object, it stays within the sphere of instinct. And I'll give you an example. Is it up here? No, it's not there. Yes, it is. Here's this thing. What is it? What is it? Until you know what this is, it just stays within the sensory realm. You don't know what it is. You just see the sensory aspects. But as soon as you know what this is, it will alter your perception of it. It's just like, imagine seeing a face. Imagine being an alien who's never seen a human face before. Right. Right, and like how that might then be interpreted. So perception is different. So let's see what I've got on these cards. Right, so for abstract types, FT determines temperament. Right, and this is, again, the asymmetry. But the asymmetry is cancelled out because it's also asymmetrical in the interaction styles, but it gets back to the same 16 type patterns that Jung observed. So for abstract types, FT, feeling thinking, determines temperament. So NT versus NF for the abstract types. And JP determines directive informing, meaning that all the NJs are directive. So ENTJ, INTJ, ENFJ, INFJ are all directive. So the JP determines the directive. All the NPs are informing. So JP determines directive informing. So it's switched around from the concrete, from the other types. So the JCF reasons. So these are my speculations. NI is very directive by definition. NE rambles all over the place with no direction. Am I not exhibit A? There we go. So if you've got NE rambling all over the place with no direction, it's not really going to be directive. You know, it can't really direct itself, the NP. So it's not really going to direct others towards one. Oh, you've got to do it this way. That's the route to take. More like, well, you could do this, you could do that. Well, it's leave it to you. Right. NI, very directed by definition. Abstract types are cognitive based, so the kind of interpretation NF versus NT is more important than NJ versus NP. Right, and I've what here? Yeah, I would say more cerebral, the abstract types. Sort of classically intellectual. This is different from intelligence. You can have very intelligent people who are not intellectual. And they even mean intelligent in like a logico-mathematical way. Like even like 150 IQ stuff at logico-mathematical, but they're not interested in abstractions and philosophy and stuff like that. Concrete types are world-based, more limbic, instinct. So the kind of instincting is more important than ST and SF, because the thinking and feeling is not as relevant. And it also might be that because you've got emotion bound up with the instinct, then, like, for example, you got a lot of STPs, and if the STP is being angry, and it's like the way they're reacting being competitive, it's like there's a lot of emotion going on in there already. And the same with like ESTJ being angry. So it's like it's bound up there. For concrete types, JP determines temperament, and FT determines bad spine. FT determines informing directive, so it's switched around. With the abstract types, it's JP determines directive informer. And there. For these ones, for concrete types, FT determines directive informer, JP determines temperament. So when you put them together, you get the same 16 types. So, and then I got some sort of like, so here we go. Clubs for cognition, temperament for motivation. So I've got some like questions here to sort of like sharp questions. Do you not want to take the reality into account that ESTP is not only directive but even fixated? So for example, if you were to do it the same way as so if you wanted to be super consistent and say, oh, it's the J's that are directive and the P's that are informant, because that's what it's like for the abstract types. But if you were to do that with STs and SFs, yeah, STs and SFs, you would have to say, with the STs, you would have to say the STJs are directive and the STPs are informer because they're perceivers. But it's like, no, they're not informer. ESTP is very directive and usually ESTP is Enneagram 8 fixated. So what I'm saying is, whole type level, what do we see with the ESTP? They're directive. So it breaks that view. So it's not the case of all perceivers have to be informer. No, ESTP is a perceiver, but it's directive. And so that goes together with all the STs are directive. Whereas you look at NTs, half of them are directive and half of them are informer. NTPs are informer. In fact, the NTPs are the only informing thinking types, and NFJs are the only directive feeling types. So if clubs were used, this is sort of a reductio ad absurdum argument, sort of, because it's by sort of consistency. Right. If clubs were used, clubs break interaction style for the concrete types, the S-press. So if you were sort of like, so for instance, you would have to say SFJs, because they're J's, they must be directive, but they're not directive. Like, for instance, if you look at the whole type level, if you look at ISFJ, it's like they're not directive. They're a J, but they're not directive. They're accommodator. So JP doesn't work to determine directive informing for concrete type for S's. JP doesn't work to determine directive informing for. So this is why it doesn't work if you're going to try and do it by clubs for this. So this is refuting that. Look at the whole type level. JP doesn't work to determine directive informing for S's. And then for STs, are you going to make STPs informing because they're Ps? Not very beta quadra. All betas are directive. All alphas are informer. Think quadra values. So this is actually consistent with those values to do it like this asymmetricality. But the asymmetricality cancels out. So is this argument to INTP accommodative rational? I can only take so much. So now I think that's okay. Roles. So we've got here. I'm going to go here. So NT is F. Oh, no, done. These are the cooperative types. Now, it says compliant, but it's like, these are about consensus, these are about compliance. That's what's in Please Understand Me Too. And what Jeff's put, compliant with group ethics and or own ethics, so not adaptive. So you can say compliant with their own sort of system, their own like system of ethics. So again, directive roles. And these are the only feelers who are directive. Look here, thinking directive types. Directive. Right, it's the NFJs because the role is directive. Mentorer, one up, one down. Counselor, counselee. And again, informing roles. Again, the SFJs. You've got the SFs as informer when it comes to the let's try and get all that in. When it comes to the concrete types. So what they are is these SFPs, they are resistant to being controlled. So it doesn't mean they're pushovers. It means they value their freedom a lot. They're just not directive of others. I mean, ESFP is not ordering other people around. But if a directive type tries to order them around, they are going to push back a lot. And so is ENFP. What else? So again, and then these also, this directive and informer, it also correlates to socially intelligent roles. So for example, again, we can look at the whole type level and say that the constructing roles, modeler and designer of theories and systems, like NTPs are sort of usually best at that, and NTJs are more better at the directive strategic role, coordinator, because that's through time, coordinating resources towards a long-term strategic objective. Right. And again here, you're directing people towards an objective of sort of a self-development objective. Again, mediators, mediating between options. What else? So then I've got something here. So with this asymmetricality, it cancels it out though. So for example, you've got idealists and rationals. So these are NF and NT. So that's using, but then you're still doing it by, because these are, for this, it would be STs are directive. So that's when it's sort of more introverting, contender. But these are the directive ones, and these are the informing ones. So informing and reserved is accommodator or behind the scenes. I use these terms because these are the terms in Keirsey and a little bit quicker. And so you get to the same 16 types. So let's go through them all. So ENTP, collaborator rational. INTP, accommodator rational. We do it in terms of quad order if you like. Guardian, collaborator guardian, ESFJ. Accommodator guardian, ISFJ. Initiator idealist, ENFJ. Contender idealist, INFJ. Initiator artisan, ESTP. Contender artisan, ISTP. Initiator rational, ENTJ. Contender rational, INTJ. ESFP is going to be collaborator artisan. ISFP is going to be accommodator artisan. Now onto the deltas. ESTJ is going to be initiator guardian. ISTJ is going to be contender guardian. ENFP is going to be collaborator idealist. INFP is going to be accommodator idealist. So you get towards the same So the asymmetricality cancels out. Like I said, so with the abstract types, you've got temperament done by thinking versus feeling, and the interaction style is done J versus P. And for the concrete types, you've got temperament is done J versus P, and interaction style is done thinking versus feeling. But when you get to the 16 type, that it's like those two asymmetricalities cancel out and you end up at the same place. So it's like the asymmetricality within interaction styles is cancelled out by the asymmetricality in temperament. Right. Right. What else have we got? I think that's it. That's it. So it goes back to this board of why it's not by clubs, because you get to these situation where it's those two examples. If you're going to do it by clubs, if you're going to say interaction style has to be done by clubs, then it's like you would say ISFJ has to be directive because it's a J. It's not, though. It's informal. And ESTP is a perceiver, but it's very directive. So what does this show? This proves that it's ST versus SF for the concrete types. And so, like I said, this is an argument from consistency and where you end up. And so I suppose my overall argument is it's very hard to argue against the interaction styles because what you see, and by doing the temperaments as NT, NF, SJ, SP, that is consistent with that, and it's consistent with a thing that I can prove more then. And whereas if it was done by clubs, it wouldn't be consistent with that then. So that's what I sort of mean by a sort of reductio ad absurdum argument. It's a sort of reductio ad absurdum argument by association. So this is reductio ad absurdum in terms of interaction style, but it's by association because in order to get to the same 16 types, you need to do it as the way it's done in terms of the asymmetricality and temperament. So again, it's a bit of an INTP argument, but hopefully I got my point across, or at least some of it. Bye-bye.